Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guest on this next interview. Now, major NATO initiative aims to streamline the purchase of U.S. weapons for Ukraine, reinforcing Kyiv war effort as Russian attacks intensify. Yet two key European powers, France and Italy, have reportedly opted out, according to Ukrainian outlets, citing concerns ranging from cost to strategic autonomy. Their decisions have stirred debate about alliance cohesion and Europe's defense identity. Joining us today on TVP World to unpack this is Giuseppe Adamo, International Affairs Analyst from the Institute of New Europe, an active voice on European defense policy and Italian foreign affairs. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here once again.
So can you help us set the stage? What's at stake with this new NATO initiative, and how important is the coordination of armed procurement for Ukraine?
So, as we have seen, this NATO-United States deal is something that would like to have the European Union countries to buy American equipment with European money, European taxpayer money, and then forward them to Ukraine. Is a really clever escamotage from the United States side to have European taxpayer paying for the American military industries to avoid criticism at home by the hardcore Republicans saying that the United States is spending money for another country because it should be America first. So it's a really smart, from their point of view, escamotage to get Europe to pay for the Ukraine defense, but financing the American military industry. So not all the European countries have agreed to it, as we have seen.
Right. And speaking of which, we're talking about, of course, France and Italy's refusal to join. Some of them are talking about strategic autonomy. People are citing costs as well. Are they protecting strategic autonomy, or do you think it's more of a resource issue?
So I think it's both. As when there are complex decisions, a controversial decision, there's always multi-factors kicking in. Mm-hmm. From the French perspective, they have an history of wanting to lead the European Union defense. They have an history of being skeptical about NATO and especially American initiatives, as we remember the de Gaulle empty chair policy in the 60s. So what Macron would like to achieve is to rather foster the European industry and the French industry, of course, because as we know, they always pro-Europe until they are leading it. They have an history of a little bit self-reference on these matters. So what they would like to do is taking the occasion, taking the tragedy of the war to finally foster the European defense system without financing others. When it's from the Italian perspective, from my point of view, I think it's more a matter of political gaining and of resources. Italy is a country whose economy is stagnating in the last 20 years, more or less, is a country with a really high public debt. And Mr. Giorgia Meloni knows really well that in this moment where already she obliged to spend 5% of the GDP for the military expense, which is seen as really controversial in the Italian public opinion, which doesn't understand the sides of the Ukrainian conflict. It doesn't really perceive the danger, as for Ukraine, for them, is pretty far geographically. Even promising, moreover, that we're gonna use this money not for our industry or for German, Italian or German-French joint venture that already exists, but for buying foreign equipment. That's going to be a huge assist for her opposition at home. She's going to lose consent, so she doesn't want that, despite she's really close to the American administration. Yeah. So we've seen that despite sometimes politically they're close, some national interests could really diverge.
So you mentioned Macron's intention in protecting or fostering the EU industry and the French industry. Now there's people saying that France and Italy also produce very similar weapon systems to that the Americans are currently trying to sell to the EU and then transfer to Ukraine. Do you think that there's also a conflict of interest there, or is it perhaps not enough to kind of throw out the whole NATO initiative in procuring US arms?
No, I think, of course, there is a conflict of interest. I've read today that, for example, France produced really similar anti-flight and like similar to the Patriot system. Yeah. So the defense system, the Rafale system, as we know, is pretty old. They have an history, a tradition of military industry. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is also a matter of interest. We like to remember that between Macron and previously Biden, there was a huge issue regarding military procurement. So already with the old American administration, there were different interests at stake because they produce really similar stuff. They have really similar buyers could be in the Middle East, or could be these non-aligned countries, so or Israel. So as we've seen, of course, this is a market as well, not only a political but a market fight.
Right. Do you think that this is going to risk impacting NATO's unity, putting it under pressure, seeing that major players are opting out of joint efforts like this?
It may do. But as far we should be optimistic as far. Nevertheless, we are starting finally saying that Europe should rearm itself. We are starting saying that military expenditure are something that are useful, point first. And secondly, this is high added value industry. This is not about just buying some rifles and shipping over. This is about an industry with really high R&D, research and development, really high technology that then has impacts on jobs, has impacts on our whole industrial military complex and industrial complex, civilian complex as well. So we have to start saying that these are not wasted money. This is not about buying something. This is about investing in your really heavy industry that has a real impact on jobs, real impact on GDP, right? One of the reasons why the United States, among all the others, that the United States GDP is surpassed Europe in the last 15 years is also because they have a huge military industrial complex that's a lot of research and development, that has a lot of aerospatial industry that is pushing the growth in the United States, that is not pushing the growth in Europe as well, with the exception of Poland and a few other countries, right? So there should be, I think in the Western Europe especially, there should be soon a switch of narrative that step by step is going on. But still, as we've seen, as is normal, this is about billions of euro at stake, it's not unitary. It includes discussion, it includes negotiation, it includes finding common solution. And we are slightly getting that. But it's normal that during this route, there are a little bit of disagreements.
Yeah, you brought up the fiscal aspect of it, and Italy has also voiced concern over some of the EU fiscal policy rules. Do you think that budget constraint would actually intersect with its role in NATO as well? In the war, we always hear kind of a lot of these European countries coming out and saying that they will support Ukraine as long as it takes, whatever it takes. But do you think at some point that the fiscal constraint is going to be kind of starting to rear its head?
You know, I'm always being skeptical, or whatever it takes, as long as it takes. As far we know that really often this is rhetorical excuses. We know that if a government is in the dichotomy of choosing between budget constraints and helping a foreign country, despite this foreign country is crucial for European security, they will think twice before acting, because as we know, these are real impact on the public opinion, real impact of the consequence, real impact on the stability of the government. So of course budget constraints are an issue, especially for Italy, but I think that it really depends on what the European Commission is going to decide. If the European Commission, as we know already, is going to move toward the direction that the deficit for military expenditure is not counted in the 3% Eurozone limit, I think we're going to have huge margins for new military industries, for unifying finally the military procurement in Europe. I think that's a big step that yet European countries has not been brave enough to do. I think it's the time to be brave. It's the time to say we should unify the military procurement. We should unify, interconnect our military industries. And sometimes this comes from France, like some objections come from France, some objections come from Germany. So not necessarily is the United States sometimes, not necessarily is Hungary, not necessarily. Sometimes it's the same big European players that are saying, okay, we want the unified procurement, we want unify, but knowing that this industry, we're going to share it with the French, we're going to share with the Germans, we're going to share with the Italians. I'm not fine with it. I'm going to a little bit obstacle it. So sometimes it's not only about the others. Sometimes it's about the same European countries that look short term. If we see, I can give you a practical example. 2017, Italy was really close to take over the Nazar Navy docks in France, and Macron was opposed to it, saying this is our national treasure, should not go to Italian hands. So now, after the war in Ukraine, things are shifting. Right. We are understanding that it doesn't make sense to have a rivalry inside Europe for the same product. When going together, we can actually compete with the United States, we can compete with China, and we can unify our R&D. But to arrive to that point, you need a little bit to look forward, to go after, to look long term, not only to the short-term national interests.
Right. You mentioned perhaps the war in Ukraine actually changed the dynamics of how these countries work with each other a little bit. Do you think that we might see a growing demand for a truly European defensive posture and perhaps a preference for more homegrown equipment instead of over-reliant on the U.S. systems?
Yes, but also I don't want to say that having a European unified procurement system, having a European industrial military complex, that should be at the opposite of the Americans. I think it should be complementary. You know what I mean? I think we are all in NATO. We understood how NATO is important for us. I think we should really get over the logic of watching only to your own garden. I think we should make a system that is all complementary, because we are part of the West. We share the same values. We have unified threat. I think if we really want to have a really smart logistics, really a smart procurement, a smart implementation system, we should unify strengths, and we should just define how. And I think this is a view that more or less is shared by everyone. Just how we should do it creates controversies.
All right, and last but not least, talking about the fiscal aspect of things, do you think that the proposal to fund Ukraine's defense using a frozen Russian asset is something that is a workable solution?
I think it's a wonderful idea. I think actually that's short term the best idea, because Russian frozen assets would not be there forever and they are limited. But I think the short term could really smart idea. But there are, as always, when you're talking about frozen assets, there are logistical and legal issues, because these frozen assets are all around the world. And there are also not only legal issues, but you should expect retortion from this terrorist country, which is at our borders. So I think we should start, we should start another discussion about how to use the frozen assets, because they are there since now 3 and 4 years, and nobody knows more or less what to do with that, how to do with that. I think European and world leaders should sit at the table and find a compromise about how to start to use them, because we have billions frozen and nobody's taking them. It's just there, we are waiting for, we don't know why, right? So,
there's a lot of talk around it, and it's about high time that people actually come to some conclusions. Thank you so much for your input and insight. I really appreciate it, and thanks for being with us on TVP World.
Thank you.
Cheers. And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.